Picking up from the book The Image of Bar Kokhba in Traditional Jewish Literature, False Messiah and National Hero by Richard G. Marks. Pick up on page 26 under the heading The Great Gibor. One of the most striking features of the Ben KOKHBA of these legends is his extraordinary strength. He is portrayed as a glorious warrior, fierce in battle. He heads an army of powerful, fearless soldiers. He catches the huge stones flung from Roman catapults and hurls them back, killing great numbers of enemy soldiers. One kick from his foot kills instantly. He could not be conquered by men, as Hadrian acknowledges when he declares that only God could have brought him down. Legends attribute similar abilities to other Judean warriors who fought against the Romans. One named Bar Deroma is portrayed jumping a mill about 2/3 of a mile and killing numerous Roman soldiers single-handedly. Seeing him, the emperor fears that this man might conquer the whole Roman Empire. Another legend tells of two brothers from Heruva who kill every Roman soldier that passes through their village. They too are invincible and, like Ben KOKHBA, could be stopped only by God. Footnote: B. Get 57a Y. Ta'an 4.8 24a Lam. Rab 2.5. Footnote: See Richard G. Marks' Dangerous Hero, Rabbinic Attitudes Towards Legendary Warriors, HUCA 54, 1983, 181-94. Biblical warriors in rabbinic legend. Similar powers are ascribed in rabbinic legends to a number of biblical heroes. For example, a series of legends in Parashah 93 of Midrash Genesis Rabbah portrays the sons of Jacob as mighty warriors. The legends begin with Joseph, now viceroy of Egypt, threatening to make Benjamin his slave, Genesis 44:17. In Scripture, Judah replies with humble entreaty, but in these legends he answers with threats of violence. Filled with rage, Judah chews in iron bars into powder and roars like a lion. The roar carries all the way to the land of Israel, where Dan's son, Hushim, hears it and comes to Judah's aid by jumping with the one leap to the Egypt. Together they roar so loudly that they almost turn Egypt upside down. And Judah's brothers, also enraged, stamp on the ground and make furrows. But when Joseph, not to be outdone, kicks a stone pillar into a heap of rubble, Judah finally quiets down. Footnote: Jen Rab Ed J. Theodore and C. Albeck 93 6-9. Seeing Joseph demolish the pillar in his way, Judah exclaims, "He is a Gibor like us." Here the word Gibor describes a man who performs feats of extraordinary strength like those of Judah and his brothers. This is the meaning the word has elsewhere in rabbinic literature when it refers to such heroes as Samson, Abner, and Joab, who are expressly cited as exemplary representatives of the type. Footnote: B. Quid 49b Leviticus Rab M. Margolis 5-3. Rabbinic legends ascribe to them the same astounding strength that Judah and his brothers exhibit. According to certain sages, Samson could uproot 2 mountains and grind them into dust. and he could traverse vast distances in a single step. His shoulders were 100 feet wide. 26. Leviticus Rab 8, 2b, Sota 9b, 10a. The Samson of Scripture is a fierce and powerful warrior, but rabbinic legends picture him even stronger, larger, and more terrifying. As for Abner, a legend depicts his strength and size by comparing him to a wall 11 feet high by 11 feet thick. This wall would be easier to move than just one of Abner's feet. The Ben KOKHBA of the legends is neither explicitly called a Gibor, but he and Bar Daroma are portrayed with the exceptional strength and fighting ability that characterize the biblical heroes as Giborim. Ben KOKHBA and Bar Daroma even exhibit some of the same abilities: a powerful kick, distant leaps, that the sons of Jacob do. I am speaking about a type of hero in rabbinic legend, and Ben KOKHBA fits the type. Footnote: Gen Rab S. Mes V. 96. The word Gibor has other meanings in rabbinic usage. It can specify a particular type of soldier, such as a knight on horseback or a veteran soldier of high rank. The Hasmoneans and Zealots, on the other hand, do not. Rabbinic legend portrays them as kings and rebels, but not as Gibborim. As is usual in rabbinic thought, recent history is understood through typologies perceived in Scripture. I contend that Ben KOKHBA is perceived through such a typology, including the particular values and vices of biblical Gibborim, and that the legends understand his failure as a consequence of sins characteristic of Gibborim. Rabbinic legends and commentary express a variety of attitudes towards Gibborim. The texts convey a sense of pleasure in telling the feats of the mighty heroes of Israel. This pleasure is evident in the way Judah's confrontation with Joseph is told. Many of the details have no teaching value and function only to show off the hero's strength. There is a tone of light-hearted sport to the story as brothers vie to outdo one another. But these feats of strength arouse pride too. When Manasseh stamps his foot on the floor so hard that the entire palace shakes, Judah cries out, "Such a stamp could come only from my father's house." The Jewish audience is expected to feel pride in the strength of its warrior fathers. A legend in Midrash, Leviticus Rabbah, has a similar intent when it describes the nations of the world, boasting that Goliath is the greatest Gibor of all the Israel, replying that its own Samson is greater. In addition, the texts generally consider the Gibor's strength valuable insofar as he uses it properly. Judah's use of force to save Benjamin appears justified in the legend, and sages approve of the way Samson used his strength to protect Israel and punish the Philistines. However, the same text, even in the same sages that expressed admiration for Gibborim, we can detect also a sense of anxiety about them. Because Gibborim possessed tremendous strength, how they used it became all the more important. There was all the more danger from what they could do wrong. The blessing could turn into a curse. In the rabbinic text dealing with Gibborim, this problem claims the greater portion of attention. Possessing strength to an extreme measure, these heroes served the sages as object lessons in the nature and use of force. Three themes stand out in particular. First, the text warn against putting too much faith in one's own powers, as Gibborim are apt to do. Samson is criticized for boasting. Abner is presented as an object lesson in overconfidence. His example proves that however strong one may become, one can never win the battle against death. Since, as Scripture says, Ecclesiastes 9:11, the battle is not to the Gibborim. Ben KOKHBA and Bar Duroma, as we shall see, represent especially egregious examples of overconfidence. Second, the texts teach from the examples of Gibborim that God is the true source of strength, and that the warrior's own strength is conditional, dependent upon his good relationship with God. The legend is careful to ground Joseph's strength in his fear of heaven, and sages teach that Samson's lost his strength not through mere recklessness, but because he rebelled, marad, against God, and for this suffered punishment. The third theme has to do with the proper exercise of force, and comes out of the fear expressed often in the text that Gibborim might use their strength in dangerous and sinful ways. We see the concern expressed most clearly in an exchange between two sages, and has been included with the legends about Judah and his brothers. The text has Ar-Hama-B, Hanina, question Joseph's prudence in asking his guards to leave him alone with his brothers, since, as the sage says, just one kick from his brothers would have killed him instantly. But Rabbi Samuel B. Naamani replies that Joseph, trusting in his brother's righteousness, Sidquan Shel Ihav, thought to himself, "Heaven forbid, my brothers are not to be suspected of shedding blood." The point is, however, that Ar-Hama does suspect Joseph's brothers of shedding blood, and expresses concern as to what they might do with their enormous strength. This same fear shows elsewhere in the legends, with the various pictures of how terrifying This same fear shows elsewhere in the legends, with the various pictures of how terrifying Judah appears in his rage, and how frightened Joseph and his guards become of him. In these legends, Gibborim aroused the fear that they might lose control of their strength and commit serious crimes. Abner did not lose control of his strength, but he did fail to use it responsibly. Expressing opinions about why Abner deserved his death at the hands of Joab, various sages suggest the following sins. Abner killed Ashahel needlessly, when wounding him would have sufficed. Abner made sport of human life by commanding young men to fight each other in a contest. He stirred up hostility between Saul and David, and he did not act to save the priest of Nob. What all these sins suggest is an attitude dangerous in a Gibbor, a disregard for human life resulting in needless bloodshed and strife. For this, Abner deserves his death. What we therefore find expressed in the various legends and opinions that make up the rabbinic text dealing with Gibborim is an ambivalence. This ambivalence characterizes not only the texts themselves as an aggregate, but also individual sages who sometimes speak with favor of a Gibbor and other times with disapproval. On the one hand, the texts present the mighty heroes of Israel as men in whom to take pride and pleasure. Their strength had value in defending Israel. But on the other hand, the same texts convey a sense of concern about Gibborim. because their strength was liable to make them presumptuous, refusing to acknowledge its transcendent source, or losing control, they could use it in a sinful manner. The Gibor was a dangerous hero. Messiah as Gibor. A further danger was that the Gibor might be mistaken for the Messiah. In Midrash Genesis, the tradition is recorded that Jacob mistook Samson for the Messiah. Our father Jacob foresaw him, Samson, and thought that he was the King Messiah. But when he saw him die, he said, "He too is dead. I wait for your salvation, O God." Genesis 49:18. Footnote: Rabbi Isaac on Samson B. San 99b and Rabbi Yohanan in B. Sota Tene, where he speaks disapprovingly of Samson's sins, but then praises him for judging Israel, in the same manner as their Father in heaven. If we were able to analyze these opinions historically, we might discover that the positive and negative opinions reflect different periods of time or opposing political factions among the sages. My present purpose, however, is only to examine the final edited texts, which record both positive and negative opinions together, and also from the same sages. This mistake resembles Rabbi Akiva's when Ben KOKHBA, in which he proclaimed Ben KOKHBA the Messiah because of his feats of strength in battle, the powers that distinguished a Gibor. We meet in these legends about Jacob and Ben KOKHBA the image of the Messianic king, conceived as a great Gibor, found especially in the Targum, and related to the ideal king portrayed as Gibor in Psalm 45 and 89. These psalms explicitly call the king a Gibor, and they describe him wielding a sword to fight for righteousness, Psalm 45, and conquering all his enemies, Psalm 89. We have already seen that the Targum renderings of Numbers 24:17 to 24 portray the Messiah as a fierce, bloody warrior fighting the great final war against Rome. Other passages in the Targum, notably Genesis 48:10, portray him similarly. The extraordinary martial power displayed by Gibborim and the warrior Messiah points to God. A tradition about Samson states that his strength was created in the likeness of gods. Mayin Dugma Shel Malah. Another tradition views Samson's astounding powers and terrifying appearance as manifestations of the Shekinah, the divine presence. Rabbi Akiva considers Ben KOKHBA's feats in battle a sign, and he was the man who would fulfill God's messianic promises. Legendary Greek heroes also exhibit superhuman powers. Achilles is nearly invulnerable to weapons, and Heracles performs extraordinary feats of strength, daring, and military prowess. Such power was explained in legend by the hero's birth from the seed of Zeus and by the constant intervention of the gods. Hesiod conceived of the heroes as half-gods, hemithoi. Pindar called Heracles Heros Theos, hero and god. The strength of Greek heroes in early legend thus resembles that of Samson in rabbinic legend, who was endowed with a secret transcendent quality. What does this similarity between Gibborim and Greek heroes mean? We may simply be seeing separate internal developments of typical hero myths found in many different cultures, or perhaps Jews of the Hellenistic and Roman periods were magnifying the powers of their indigenous military heroes under the stimulus of Greek and Roman myths. I have argued that Ben KOKHBA is portrayed in the Jerusalem Talmud and Midrash Lamentations as a Gibor. Let's read that again. I have argued that Ben KOKHBA is portrayed in the Jerusalem Talmud and Midrash Lamentations as a Gibor, a charismatic warrior who shared certain features in common with Greek legendary heroes. Since the rabbinic legends view Ben KOKHBA as an instance of this general character type, the Gibor we shall devour. Oh my God! Again. Since the rabbinic legends view Ben KOKHBA as an instance of this general character type, the Gibor we shall discover that the attitudes we saw expressed towards other Gibborim will resemble the attitudes we find expressed towards Ben KOKHBA. Literary elements in the story. The opposing armies. The legends tell the story of the last days of Bitar, beginning when Ben KOKHBA's power is at its height, just before the critical turn of events. He has withstood the Roman siege for 3.5 years, and Hadrian is ready to yield and return home. Hence, as these legends tell it, the war was not futile from the outset, and Ben KOKHBA might actually have defeated Hadrian. Why he did not is the subject of the story. The first scene pictures the two opposing armies, both of equal strength, facing each other over the siege walls that surround Bitar. 80,000 pairs of trumpets surround Bitar, and each of them was set over many soldiers. And Ben KOKHBA was there, and he had 200,000 soldiers. All the numbers in the story are immense. The legends suggest a total sum of at least 2 million soldiers, and Bitar itself is later ascribed an enormous population. These tremendous sums, far greater than the modern historian would permit, express the extraordinary significance attached to the event in the memory of the people. The fates of nations were at stake. The outcome was momentous. Every move affected multitudes. The huge size attributed to the Roman forces shows in addition the strength Ben KOKHBA possessed, holding them back for so long and nearly defeating them. The story goes on to describe Ben KOKHBA's army. It was composed entirely of men who had passed formidable tests of courage and strength. The point of the story is to show how exceptional Ben KOKHBA's army had been, and to proclaim that Israel in those days had men brave enough to chop off a finger and strong enough to uproot a cedar of Lebanon. This expression of pride in Israelite warriors accords with the pride expressed elsewhere in rabbinic literature over the Gibborim. Some footnotes. Based on the conclusions of Vermes and Miller, editions in Schuher History of the Jewish People, 547 to 48, the 6 legions and 7 cohorts were involved in the war in Judea, not all of whom would be deployed at Bitar. The number of Roman soldiers at Bitar could not have been more than 40,000. Next footnote. A cedar of Lebanon can reach 40 feet in girth and 90 in height, an enormous size. Rabbinic comments, Numbers, Rabbah 3:1 and 19:3, refer to it as the tallest and largest of trees. There are no models in Scripture or rabbinic literature for such tests. Gideon's test of his soldiers, Judges 71-8, does not evaluate their endurance or strength in rabbinic literature. It was interpreted as a test for piety. See Louis Ginsburg, Legends of the Jews, Philadelphia, 1962, 4:40. And his sources, the prototype for Ben Kosova's test, must therefore have been derived from elsewhere, and after all, trials for admission into an elite army and test of valor are common folklore motifs. The second theme to notice in this section, and its major theme of the Ben Kosova legends, is that the conflict between Ben Kosova and the sages. On just what grounds the sages object to Ben Kosova's test is unclear. Their concern could have been a matter of halakha, rabbinic law, since maimed priests and Levites would be disqualified from serving in the temple, or a matter of practical advice, as Samuel Krauss suggested, since the loss of a finger reduces a soldier's effectiveness. Footnote. The phrase Be'al Mom applied here to Ben Kosova's soldiers has also a technical meaning referring to a sacrificial animal that has a blemish disqualifying its use at the altar, as in M. Bek 5.5, but the phrase can also be applied to men, as in M. Bek 7.1. These same blemishes, mumin, disqualify a man from serving in the temple. Samuel Krauss in Haverlat Bar KOKHBA, Sefer HaYuval Yikvad, Alexander Marks, New York, 1950, imagines the sages saying to Bar KOKHBA, "You are weakening the strength of your warriors." In either case, end of footnote. In either case, the sages are not objecting to the war itself, but only to the way Ben Kosova is conducting it. Their demand for a new form of trial gives the storyteller the opportunity to show that Israel's warriors could excel in any test given them. The story's ending may have been told ironically, with a pleased chuckle, undisturbed by the arduousness of the sage's new test. Ben Kosova's men proceed easily to master that one too. The Battle Prayer. The prayer uttered by Ben Kosova before going forth to battle reveals a significant feature of his character. Master of the world, he says in the legend, neither help us nor shame us, as it is written, "Do not, O God, cast us down, and do not, O God, go forth against our enemies." Psalm 60:12. 42. Footnote. This is not the usual translation of the verse, but Ben Kosova's prayer assumes this midrashic reading. There is also some questions as to how the prayer itself should be translated. Whom does Ben Kosova ask God not to aid and not to shame? Israel or Rome? Abramsky, Bar KOKHBA 66, offers two possible translations. Do not help us and do not shame us, for good or for evil, and do not help our enemies and do not shame us. But the general intent is clear in any case from the context from Psalm 60:12, by the comparison with the stories of Bar Doroma and the two brothers of Heruva. End of footnote. This same prayer is also placed in the mouths of the other Judean Gibborim. Bar Doroma and the two brothers of Heruva, whose stories are in the main elaborations upon the motif in Ben Kosova legends. In the case of Bar Doroma, we learn that uttering these words constitutes a grave sin, for the legend states that the mouth of Bar Doroma caused his downfall, and immediately thereafter a snake, considered an agent of divine punishment in rabbinic legends, kills him. Ben Kosova's prayer then implies a sin, that of refusing to trust in God. It shows him to be a warrior who took so much pride in his own strength and the might of his army that he thought he needed no help from God. He wanted to win the battle unaided and unhindered by divine intervention. As we saw with Samson and Abner, this is an attitude associated with Gibborim as a character type. The Gibbor had such extraordinary strength that he tended to become boastful and overconfident, forgetting that his strength depended upon the will of God. Sennacherib is ascribed a similar fault in 2 Kings 19:21-28, and Isaiah 10:12-15. Isaiah rebukes the Assyrian king for the insolence and blasphemy of thinking that he had conquered foreign nations through his own might, when in truth he had merely served as an instrument of God. The victories were God's. Ben Kokhba's prayer is reminiscent of these passages, and it is also reminiscent of the rabbinic concept of Geshut HaRuah, arrogance, which conceives of a person's magnifying himself to such an extent that he leaves no room for the presence of God. Footnote: God and the arrogant man cannot exist together. Pride amounts to a denial of God. B. Sota 4b 5a. A proud man treads upon the feet of the Shekinah, the presence of God. B. Bear 43b. There is no room for self-magnification before God. Numbers, Rabbah 4:20 and 5 and 8. End of footnote. Our text portrays Ben Kokhba in just this way, as a Gibor so confident of his strength that he left no room for providence in the conduct of the war.